Should America be afraid of China? Can we effectively compete with a rising China? Or are we actually doomed to have a conflict with China, potentially over Taiwan? Those are some really important questions, and there's not a lot of very clear answers on them so far. But there's a lot of people that are engaged in it and want to take things in certain directions. But look, I just want to tell you point blank right off the top, China is a growing power. This is not 1990s anymore, where China was weak and we could tell them anything we wanted them to do, and we could do whatever we wanted, and they were powerless to do anything about it. And that's no longer the case. China has a very modern and very powerful economy, even though it's got problems like everybody else, but it's still the world's second largest economy. And there's every reason to believe that's going to continue on for a while. And militarily, they have been on a decades-long military buildup of substantial every year increases. And now then they have a very robust military. And certainly in the area of their borders and around the area of Taiwan, it's every bit as good as ours in those areas right there in terms of technical capacity. We don't know about the manpower. We don't know if they're is skilled in using that technology, but we know they have a lot of it and a lot of firepower that they can bring to bear. So the question is, are the United States and China doomed to a conflict? Is that something that we should do? Do we even want to do that? Can we even do that? And what would be the potential outcome of that? Now, some of these issues were addressed earlier this week in a Fox News report, where we see some of these things playing out in some of the higher level political and diplomatic issues in the posturing between the various parties. And we see how it fits in with so many things that are going on in our world and have direct relevance to American national security and American economic security. Roll the tape.
It does seem that the Biden administration is trying to make some effort to be nice to Beijing. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan holding 2 days of talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Malta here in Europe. It's the latest of several reach outs in recent months by the White House to the government of Chinese President Xi Jinping. The discussions described by Washington as, quote, candid, substantive, and constructive. But perhaps a better sign of how things are going is where Wang went next, Moscow, for 4 days of meetings. Today with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The Chinese envoy used the session to hail what he called, quote, the strategic cooperation between two countries who seek a more just world order. Now, Wang's Russian visit thought to be working out the details of a possible summit next month between Xi and Russian President Putin. Putin's been eager to keep Beijing close as it seeks allies and support for its war against Ukraine. Less likely, but still a possibility, a summit between Xi and President Biden on the sidelines of an Asia-Pacific gathering in San Francisco in November. But there's no confirmation that Xi will even make the trip across the ocean. As if to underscore finally where China's strategic head is at, Beijing sending what's being called a recent high of 103 warplanes towards Taiwan in the last 24 hours. It claims the island democracy as its own and makes military shows of that fact quite frequently.
Now, as anyone who's paying any attention at all to the China-U.S. issues, both of the economic and political and military issues over the last decade or so, understands that there's a lot of different views on this. In the United States, you have one camp that's basically says China is our enemy, and we need to push back really hard. We need to show them that we're strong. We need to show them who's boss, and we need to deter them from going and trying to take Taiwan by force. And as many of you may know, Taiwan is an island about 100 miles off the coast of China that China claims, the communist government claims as part of their country. And the Taiwanese country, their government, which actually fled the island, the mainland in 1949 and formed what we now call Taiwan, the Republic of China. That's what they call themselves formally. And they consider themselves an independent nation and not part of China. And so there's all this conflict about, whether China is going to reunify by force, et cetera, and the consequences for the United States. Now, look, just on the surface of it, if there is ever war between China and Taiwan, if Xi Jinping chooses to use military force to try to make good on something he's promised to his people for many years now, the impact of the world will automatically be basically catastrophic economically, because there are so many things with microchip technology and other trade that's going on in the certain reaction of the Western world, and many people trying to find out whose side who's is going to be on with other countries. But it will just be massively disruptive to the entire global economy. So there is every reason for us to want to avoid a conflict with China and Taiwan. That can be substantially worsened if the United States gets drawn into that fight. Now, we have a number of agreements with Taiwan to help them defend themselves. There's the Taiwan Relations Act, and there's a number of other nuances we've done. We annually give large numbers or sell large numbers of weapons to Taiwan, and we help them to defend themselves, and we do some training, those kinds of things. But we don't have a NATO type alliance like where there's Article 5, negotiate. So if one is attacked, it's an attack on both, or like we do with South Korea, Japan, or Australia in that area. We have mutual defense pact treaties with those countries. We don't with Taiwan. So we have had what's called strategic ambiguity for many decades now, to where we don't actually say whether we would or wouldn't fight on behalf of Taiwan. But there has been a move in the United States over the last several years that they want to have strategic clarity to where, no, if China invades Taiwan, we will come fight for their defense. Now, kind of like we've talked about in some of the problems with the Russia-Ukraine war in terms of aspirations driving policy, the aspiration that many have is reasonable and understandable, that we don't want China to use force to reunify the very democratic Taiwan government. And that is a totally valid desire to have, no question about it. The question is how to best achieve that outcome. Now, there's one camp that says we need strategic clarity, and basically we need to make a mutual defense pact with Taipei, so that an attack on one is an attack on all. Of course, in practical means, that means that it will make Taiwan a protectorate, because they're never going to come fight on any war for us. But that's a secondary issue there. But by doing that, we put ourselves square in the crosshairs of China, because I'll just tell you, just flat out, there is no chance that China is going to allow the U.S. and Taiwan to have any kind of a mutual agreement for defense and them stand by and be deterred by that. That's what the West wants. That's what a lot of these advocates desire. They want Beijing to feel, oh, dang, we can't do that, or we'll have war with the United States, and we have so much bilateral trade, we can't risk it, so we won't do it. That's what they hope would happen. But they almost certainly, and I can't say flat out, because until something happens, you don't know what may happen. But I'll say with a great deal of confidence, the most likely outcome is that China would then launch a war before anything got solidified, because they know that to wait later would mean that they would never be reunified with Taiwan, which is a very emotional issue for the Chinese. Now, it is no chance, and this I can point blank tell you, there is no benefit, no value to the United States to engage in a war with China over the Taiwan issue. Just point blank, I can tell you, there is no scenario, and let me be clear on this and make sure you understand, there is no scenario whereby the American country, our national security and our economic prosperity will be improved by fighting with China in the event that they go to war in Taiwan. Now, as I said a second ago, if China decides to try and take Taiwan, that's already going to be a catastrophic global issue in both putting security at risk as well as economic. So there's going to be cost and harm to everybody. That's the baseline entry point to this conversation. The question is, what's going to happen next, and what can we do to assure our situation in the event that happens? And I can just promise you, every scenario that's been painted, that's been drawn out, all these war games that have been done, computer simulations, 100% of them show that the United States would suffer just extraordinary levels of loss. In some scenarios, we lose 4 aircraft carriers. Let that sink in for a second. Just imagine, we've never had anything since the last aircraft carrier we lost was in World War II, I believe in the Battle of Midway. But 4 could be lost in this one with it. Hundreds of planes. In one scenario that was run by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, 700 American warplanes were knocked out in one of the scenarios that they ran. They did 24 of them. And some of those that were on the lower end of that were only hundreds of them, and only about 20 American warships knocked out, and tens of thousands of troops died. That's the best case scenario, that our national defense capacity globally would be deeply gashed. So anytime someone tells you, yes, we have to do that because we have to defend democracy, and if we let China do that, then they'll do, first of all, there's no dominoes. That was proven in Vietnam. That was exposed as being nonsense then. and it's still nonsense today. Everything is its own situation. There's no dominoes waiting to fall. Things will either work or they won't based on the dynamics that are involved in that situation. Taiwan will either stand or fall based on the dynamics between China and Taiwan. It's not like anything else in Asia is going to suddenly fall to the Chinese because, number one, like Russia is learning to their chagrin right now, once you move on that, and China would itself suffer egregious losses to its military. It would be decades before they could have any, chance to rebuild their military to even think about threatening another country. And of course, everyone in that country then has the chances to, make sure that their national security is taken care of. So forget about these dominoes. There's no dominoes. So the best case scenario for the United States in the event China goes to war is not to fight on behalf of Taiwan, but to do everything we can to contain the war to where it's at right then. Now imagine this. Here's what also those advocates for war with China won't tell you. And it's self-evident if you think about it. If China goes to Taiwan and we don't fight China over it, but we try to seal the area off to not let China do anything else, go anywhere else, we now have the U.S., Japan, South Korea, and Australia, our 4 treaty allies, all at 100% capacity. We haven't lost a ship. We haven't lost a plane. We haven't lost a soldier. So we are at our absolute military strength. And of course, from that point forward, we can start making it even stronger to make sure that China doesn't try to do anything. China, at the same time, will be substantially weaker than it is right now. And, they will have suffered egregiously from the war that they had with Taiwan. So in an environment to where China attacks Taiwan and they are harmed, and Taiwan is harmed, and the global economy is harmed, and there's no way to avoid that. That's a given that's going to affect everybody. But you have 2 choices then. We can either make ourselves much more vulnerable, lose thousands of troops, and most likely, in my best analysis, is that we would not successfully prevent China from doing that. So we would fail. We would lose that war because China's fighting from 100 miles off and we're fighting from about 6,000. Do the math. It's not hard to figure out why that would be the case. We don't have the military industrial capacity to be able to sustain a long war anyway. China does. They've actually planned for this, and they have the substantial industrial capacity to maintain war stocks, ammunition, all the things they would need. We don't. So any way you want to look at it, we can't go toe-to-toe with China over Taiwan from 6,000 miles away. They can't. So if your choice is between a bad situation economically, but a very, very strong, united, allied front around China that would definitely contain them then, or one in which we have gashed our own national security at the best case scenario, and in the worst case scenario, actually lose, then where's the decision to make that? That should be self-evident. There's only one course of action if China makes the bad choice to attack its neighbor Taiwan. Now, what we should be doing is everything in the meantime, before anything happens, we should be supporting to continue to help Taiwan defend itself. We should make it, stronger as it can be to make China, deter China from acting because they don't want to suffer the loss that they would have from the Taiwanese military. Concurrent with that, we need to effectively compete with China. We don't need to make them our enemy. We need to recognize that if they take this action, it would be severely antithetical to our interest, just economic from the global ramifications that would follow from that. So there is a very serious issue that demands very concerted effort. But diplomacy has a much better chance of avoiding a war at all than to all the time trying to be tough on China, all the time trying to expand our military, to build more ships, to build more bases, to put more troops forward, which only makes China think you're coming after me. And you just have this constant ratchet up situation where each thinks the other is proving their fear that they're coming after them, and then you make war more inevitable. So we need to do something that says, hey, we're not going to commit national suicide. We're not going to ruin our military on something that almost certainly can't be successfully accomplished. And instead, we're going to do everything we can to cooperate with China where we can, to push back where we can't, and to compete vigorously in the global marketplace so that China has to expend a lot more energy because we're giving others in the world, even in Asia, a better deal, that we're a better partner. That's the way we succeed. Look, America is made great because of our innovative ways. Historically, because we have win-win situations with other people. We seek to help other nations. We're not merely looking to exploit people out. In some regards, that's kind of what China's doing. But we need to make very clear to all these other nations in the area that, hey, we're your best future here. We're actually have a better deal that's going to help you on the long term economically. And so make China have to step up their game. So that's where we have a chance to defeat China, if you will, in the marketplace and in the diplomatic field, so that we don't ever have to use our military. So let's build up the Taiwanese military. Let's help them defend themselves, but let's don't commit national suicide by throwing our military into a situation where it probably can't succeed. And in the best case scenario in there, we're deeply gashed. We are not going to be helped in any one of those scenarios, good or bad in that case. Let's avoid doing something that's stupid, and let's keep our country out of war, safe, secure, and prosperous into an indefinite future. And that's your deep dive. Thanks. I'll see you on the next episode.